Brian Fox, how are you? Brian,
I
you're
am double muted, but I'm good, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing good, thanks. Wayne and Bill were just here. I hope you heard some of that.
I did.
All right, good, good, good. Um, for those of you that don't know, and Mary, if you could you put Brian's screen up, lock Brian's screen up so that we can all see him there? Brian was with Jason Van Ziel, actually started Sonatype, and he has been through the entire journey that everybody is talking about today. And so, what we want to get with Brian is to get his view of the industry, to get his view of what's going on with Sonatype, what you can expect from us. And I'll leave it at there, Brian, because you've got a specific thing that you want to cover. And then I'll jump back in. If you need my help, I'll be here in the background.
All right. Sounds good. Let's fire up the slides here. You see everything good?
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of use this a little bit as a year in review, since many of the things I'm going to talk about have come since the last user conference that we did last June. And one of the things that we hear from our customers is that we move very fast, and sometimes people don't realize some of the innovative things we've done, especially when they're not obvious in the UIs that you're currently using every day. So I want to take this opportunity to kind of talk about those things and give a sneak peek into some things that are to come. The first thing, Wayne and Bill touched on this. Central downloads are up, way up, 147 billion downloads last year, which is continues to amaze me. Like Wayne indicated, when we really first started, it was around 500 million downloads, and we thought that was a lot back then. I don't have the graph in this slide deck, but I'm sure you'll see it sometime today, showing the hockey stick-like growth, which is amazing, considering all the predictions of Java's demise. That clearly is not manifesting. And we're seeing over 40,000 identifiable organizations. These would be large organizations that have their DNSs traceable back to their org using Central. So pretty much everybody. If you're doing any Java development, it's nearly a certainty that you're fetching those things from Central, and we take that stewardship very seriously, and the security of the ecosystem very seriously as well. And that is a big focus of sort of the hidden innovation, if you will, that goes on within Sonatype. Across our products, we've seen a ton of growth there as well. Our usage of Nexus repository continues to grow, up 64% to nearly 200,000 instances. These numbers are as of January, so we're probably much higher than that at this point. In terms of our scanning of repositories, we have a feature inside of Nexus, both open source and pro, that allow people to scan their repositories and find out what's inside there in terms of license and security risk. This is growing at a tremendous rate. Well over 141,000 individual repositories are being scanned on a daily basis, providing visibility to that ecosystem. Apps under management from our lifecycle and Nexus Auditor aspect continues to grow significantly, as does the number of eyeballs that are looking at Nexus UIs on a daily basis. And 4 million is just a guess of the users that are going at the UI. Most of those are admins, and so the actual usage count behind this is going to be significantly higher when you think about the fact that the repository is often primarily used by the tools. Maven and Gradle and things like that are the ones that are actually hitting it. Not every single user is loading the UI. So this continues to boggle the mind. As I indicated previously, lots of releases. Lifecycle has pushed out 16 releases in the last year. Nexus 3 has had 11 major releases, and Nexus 2 has had 6 minor bug fix and other patch releases in that time. And so that's pretty exciting to see, and we continue to push the envelope on that. want to get new functionality into the hands of users as soon as possible, even while we recognize that, especially our enterprise customers, do not update 16 times a year. They might update quarterly or semi-annually, and that's okay. We have that in mind when we design this stuff, but we don't see any reason to have shelfware kicking around. So we think it's best practice to get that stuff into market as soon as possible. So I expect this number to increase next year. One of the other interesting things, not many people know about this. Sonatype every other week does an improvement day where we let our engineers and customer success and SEs kind of work on whatever improvements they want, whether they're in the product or improving their own skill sets. And in 2018, we had over 511 individual improvements that the teams worked on. Some of them that you may have seen was the newer search.maven.org refresh. That was done entirely by our team on the side using their improvement days. A couple of them banded together to do that, and improvements continue to come in there. And also a new product that we launched last year called Depth Shield, which allows you to scan your GitHub repositories and understand what's going on in there. That also started as an improvement day project. So many of the things that start as improvement days are either direct improvements to the product that will find their way into a subsequent release, or they might be the genesis of a new effort. And so that has paid dividends, I think, and we continue to do that. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we tried something new. We let the team have an entire week. So we saved up improvement days for a quarter and then applied them in 1 week following our product meetup, and allowed the teams more time to kind of congeal into actual teams and work on much bigger things. And so by my best count, we had north of 30 individual teams working on their own types of innovation. You can see some of them here, some prototypes for some more cloud native services, prototype for search, component search and vulnerability search inside of IQ. And then another one that was kind of neat was the ability to see context-specific feedback inside of the IDE, right? So this is just a sampling of the ones that I could find some screenshots for that would show well. But some of the things that will be coming out later this year may be tied to these efforts that have been spawned in this week. So stay tuned for some of that stuff. In a related fashion, earlier this year, we launched what's called Sonatype Labs. You can access it at the URL shown at the top. This is a customer-specific space for Lifecycle and Nexus repository professional customers, firewall auditor as well. And this is a space where we put some of these things that we think are nearly ready for prime time and that we want to explore. So it's a safe space for us to be able to interact with customers and show some of the upcoming things that we're working on, and for customers to be able to get value sooner out of things that might still have some sharp edges on them. I'm going to talk about a couple of those in a minute. Also, we launched what we call the Central Security Project. So we did this in conjunction with HackerOne. One of the things we saw happening in the ecosystem was that many of the projects that were distributing their binaries via Central did not have easily discoverable security contacts for, specifically, where do I go to report a 0-day? And so we saw some instances of people getting frustrated, throwing their hands up in the air and just doing a public disclosure and catching everybody off guard. So we worked with HackerOne to basically provide a safe place for 0-day reporting and CVE filing and triaging and all of that stuff for anything inside of Central. And we think this is a great resource for the community to help make everything safer. Another thing that has been somewhat interesting is what we call LORT, the License Obligation Research Tool. This is available now in the labs space. It was one of those ones shown in the screenshot earlier. As we've gone through and we've tried to provide license information for an increasing the large set of artifacts across different ecosystems, the number of licenses that we've had to research and triage and investigate and categorize has grown to a very large number. It's in well north of the hundreds, maybe 500. I've even lost track. And what's interesting is we've tried to manage them via obligations, right? To break it down, what people tend to not that tend to be mostly concerned about are the obligations in the license. Like GPL gets a bad rap because it's viral and requires you to also open source your code. That's an obligation. The rest of the license itself may not be a problem. But what's important is other licenses that have a similar obligation. You probably want to think about them in a very similar way, and our tools help you do that. What we originally designed was a tool behind the scenes to help our team annotate and correct and highlight. So what this does is it allows you to look up any of the licenses that we've researched. You can see the full text of the license on the right-hand side. In the middle column are actually all of the obligations that we've identified, and there's a huge and growing set of obligations that we track. And the highlighting is context specific on the right-hand side. So if you want to investigate why does Sonatype think that this license is in the following category or has the following obligation, we show you the work and you can go look at it yourself. We found feedback from license teams that don't know where to start and don't know how to understand what a license means. This in and of itself has been tremendously helpful to them, which is why we've released it initially as a lab, as we work to figure out how this better integrates into the product. So if you're at all interested in licenses, this something you should definitely take a look at in the labs project. The next set, I'm going to talk about some things that I think people may not realize we've added. This will be the IQ server, and then we'll follow that after with the Nexus repository enhancements. So the first one, earlier this year, we released the ability to do Python application reports. This builds upon the security research that our team had done for Nexus Firewall last year. So we have highly curated vulnerability and license information for all things Python, and we now have the ability to process Python applications, lock files, and things like that to produce a full bill of materials in more the traditional lifecycle steps. So this is one that might have been easily overlooked because you know, people may have been content using Python for firewall. So that's one. If you're interested, go take a look at that. Another sort of not so obvious enhancement is we changed the way we manage vulnerability, security issues, specifically violations. In the past, the ability to implement waivers, you know, you would apply a waiver to a violation if, for example, you had compensating controls or you were otherwise willing to accept the risk of that particular violation. The waivers were tied to basically the policy, and so what you inadvertently may have been doing was waiving the policy for all future vulnerabilities on that component, and that's clearly not what people intended. So as part of grandfathering, something I'm going to talk about in a little bit, we changed the way that works. So now you can see in the report individual violations based on each vulnerability and deal and triage with those independently, which is a huge step forward in how we want this to be managed. The next couple of slides show some of the examples of what we call the success metrics. We had feedback from customers that they wanted to understand how things were trending. And so we looked at a number of customer reports that they were producing internally to show executive management how they were being successful in rolling out Lifecycle specifically, and how they were using it. And so we call these success metrics because we also worked with customer success and said, hey, what are the types of things that you guys see that indicate a customer is being really successful with the platform or not? And let's figure out how to make a dashboard to highlight that, right? So being able to see in the top here violations and remediations over the past 12 weeks is critical. So you can discover, are we just finding problems and then proceeding to ignore them, or are we actually fixing them, or are we waiving them, right? So that's what's shown in the top here, how many new things are happening. and the week over week trend. Then we kind of break it down by, how many applications are having the following types of violations and things like that. And then of course there's the all important mean time to resolution. So all of these problems we're discovering, what is our average? Now this report can be generated either for everything or for a subset of applications or organizations or even one application. So you can have multiple views into this data so you can track across the board or per app to see if certain applications or groups are doing better or worse. And then of course there's the component-based view that kind of gives you a sense of where your biggest risk is concentrated, either by what's most popular across all of the applications and or which has the most policy violations. So that's we think that's a really helpful view, one that current customers may have overlooked as being added to the UI. So if you have an IQ server that's been updated at least in the last 6 months, you definitely have this capability. So you should go take a look for it. Another thing that we added earlier this year was what we call component category data. So this is shown in the component information panel, in the IDE, in the IQ reports, basically any place you see this panel, we've added the category of the particular component. And we've started to get feedback that people are finding this particularly useful. As we move forward into some of the futures, this will be a key building block for how we approach things. We want to be able to use the category to help people manage their policies. They may have policies that are more or less strict depending on the category. And being able to take a look at the architecture and how many different components you're using in a particular category. 15 loggers, for example. 18 different persistence libraries, whatever you have, or what is that crazy, crypto library that nobody's ever heard of? Why is that in there, right? So in the labs section as well, we also have what we call an application tech stack analysis lab that can pull data either from your Nexus instance or from your Nexus repo instance or from your lifecycle auditor IQ server and produce a report based on the category of all the components that you have in use. So if you're interested in understanding that, go take a look at that lab. We definitely are interested in feedback on that as well. But this is one of these things people may not have noticed, and it's sort of a bellwether of things to come if you want to think of it that way. Another thing we added earlier this year was the ability to hook into key Docker containers and leverage their webhooks. So when a new container is published to a repository, we want to be able to hit that and pull that in and do a scan. And so that's also out there as well. Some more integrations. We've also launched a native Atlassian Bitbucket integration. You can find this in their marketplace. So this allows you to scan and report on policy violations from a lifecycle perspective, similar to the capability we've had in Jenkins for many, many years. So that's a handy one. And then in a similar vein, also GitLab. So you're seeing an example of the same thing here, being able to understand what's happening and provide feedback into the GitLab CI integration. I think further down the road, we'll have some more GitLab integrations akin to some of the GitHub stuff that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Another thing that's happening is we are updating and replacing the application report part of the system. The application report happens to be one of the oldest pieces of the UI that has been kind of in place since the early freemium and even pre-policy days. So what's happening now is we've switched that around so that you get basically a policy-based view that is showing things. The old report, because it did predate policy in many cases, had some views that were, for example, highlighting licenses that for your particular context and your application may not actually be a problem based on your policy. Same thing with security and other things. And so now this report will be focused on using your policy to inform and prioritize the things to look at. And this is just an early screenshot of it. As we go through the transition of this, we've made the old application reports still available. You can see that in the link above. And so this is an area of rapid innovation for us. We expect many other things to come along fairly quickly. In fact, in the next week or so, we anticipate launching a security-focused view on this. Some of the feedback we received via the labs and the ideas portal on the community site was that there were certain use cases that people felt the old report served better than the new one. And so we listened to that and we responded by providing an alternate view that will be providing a flattened view for security professionals to consume and export if they need to triage a list of vulnerabilities. And so that, like I said, is coming in the next week or so. So that will appear here. We're pretty excited about that. Some other stuff that we've seen from customer feedback was the ability to purge data. As you can imagine, when you've got customers scanning 20,000 applications 10 times a day, the data can tend to pile up, and not all of those particular applications or instances are important to track over time. So we've added capabilities in the system to allow automatic purging and cleanup on certain things, and so you can configure based on which phase a particular scan happened, how long to keep it. So for example, development stuff, maybe you keep for 3 months, and releases and the things pushed into production, maybe you need to keep those for 10 years. So those types of things have been added so that we can better control the actual data growth on disk, which we know was a concern for our highest flying customers. Another aspect, this definitely falls into the case of hidden. We've added the ability to have an audit log. So we've seen people that wanted to really be able to trace what was going on behind the scenes, want to be able to feed it into other operational tools that they may have. So we added files, a file-based audit log, so that you can use your favorite tool and parse that and collect that data. So that's something you can turn on and in the back end. And then in a similar vein, we've done violation logging. So that people can use other tools like Splunk or what have you if they want to track specific violations or feed them into other things. So we've kind of dumped a bunch of the information into the log so you can parse it and figure out how to process it. So those are relatively new. And so go ahead and take a look at those. We'd love to get feedback on that. Application onboarding. This one, I think many of our customers can take a benefit from. This has been in the product since sometime in the fall last year. What we recognized was that not many companies had a good list of all the applications that they intended to scan over time. And so while we have ways to easily onboard and automatically provision applications and application IDs for, tens of thousands of applications in minutes, that kind of requires that you know about them ahead of time. And that was a challenge we heard from many organizations. And so what we've done is we've made it possible via the different plugins to basically just scan something. So the idea was, can we just flip a switch in Jenkins and have it scan all the things and have that reported into the IQ server? Or can we just enable that in our command line tool? And so that's what we've done. And so what we decided to do is allow you to create basically a new organization for these effectively uncategorized applications, and you can apply the default policy to them. So the intent here is that you can scan all the things in a very easy way. They will get auto-provisioned under this organization. And of course, the policy will highlight the things that are important. And we imagine that you would go and use the things, or go investigate the things with the greatest risk. You're not going to spend your time tracing down an application that has minimal violations in it, but the ones that have a lot, you probably want to figure that out. And so once you've traced that down, then you would be able to actually move that into the proper organization and start to track it as if it was provisioned up front. So this I think is a really helpful area for people to start to quantify the risk that they don't know they don't have, or that they don't know that they have, just by scanning all the things and then sifting through the results. And again, in instances like this, you're probably going to have those policies set up for audit only. You're not going to be breaking these builds, right? That would defeat the purpose. You want to be able to observe what's going on and then tweak. In a related fashion, grandfathering came out around the time of as onboarding last year. I think this is an area that is also underutilized and maybe not as well understood as we would like. What we observed here is we saw that many of our larger customers that had been quite successful in actually onboarding had tens of thousands of applications and were using policies via inheritance to manage them. What we found was that they were pretty much never able to get into a place where all of those applications at the same time were clean enough of certain violations that they could then turn on enforcement. So pre-existing conditions effectively were stopping them from being able to take an action on new conditions. And we observed that people that were launching with Firewall, there wasn't much pushback when they started breaking builds because developers were trying to pull in new components that had violations. Where people were concerned is when there was existing stuff and a new tool was brought to bear that suddenly created new problems that weren't there yesterday. And so grandfathering allows you to kind of split the two things. So you can say for individual policies, can these types of things be grandfathered? And what happens is when an application is scanned for the first time, any pre-existing conditions are basically split into a grandfather mode, and then in the application you're able to deal with those separately. So specifically, anything that is grandfathered would not break a build, for example, even if you set the policy to fail the build. What that allows you to do is basically bring applications in, draw the line in the sand where they are today, and then if new violations come in tomorrow, or somebody brings in a new component that has a violation, you can take whatever actions you've defined in the policy. So this, we think, will help people mature more quickly in how they take automated actions without worrying about breaking the world inadvertently. And as you see here, you may choose that certain policies simply can't be grandfathered. So of course you can turn that off if you need to. Another thing that we launched earlier this year, based on customer feedback, was Nexus Firewall for Artifactory. Right, so we had a lot of customers that were content using Artifactory as the repository, and that's fine. But they wanted our higher precision and curated data to be able to take actions upon. And so while Lifecycle itself can work regardless of what repository you have, or frankly, even if you don't have one, why you would not have a repository is a little bit beyond me, but you could. Lifecycle doesn't require it. But they wanted the firewall capability, the ability to be very upfront and block these components as they're attempting to come into the development environment. And so earlier this year, we launched that capability. So if you're an Artifactory user and you would like to have firewall, it's available. So talk to your representatives about checking that out. This next one came out of Improvement Day and kind of got to fruition through Innovation Week just a few weeks ago, a Chrome extension that works with your IQ server to provide information on the side about things you might be looking at. So this example is somebody browsing the NPM repository. On the right-hand side, that's providing you visibility into what the policy status will be if you were attempting to pull that into your particular project. So we think that's kind of neat. We'd love to have feedback on that to see how popular that is and how people like it. Okay, next we're going to switch to some of the innovations that have happened on the repository side of things. Recently, we launched the Maven staging plugin. Earlier this year, we launched the staging capability, tagging and promotion and these kinds of things for for Nexus. It's supported for many formats: Docker, NPM, Maven. I'm sure there's some others I'm forgetting that specifically have this capability. But what we launched here was an update to the popular plugin that sits inside of Maven, your Maven build itself, that can automate the staging and promotion of these types of things. And so this new plugin works with the new APIs to allow people to do that. And so we're hoping that this will help customers who have been using Nexus 2 staging with the plugin should be more easily able to move to the Nexus 3 staging model because the plugin can allow you to kind of do similar things. So you don't have to change your whole process. You can just use the plugin to leverage the new capabilities. Another thing that was added earlier this year, we had feedback that when organizations were using Python, PyPy support within Nexus repository, that it was breaking PyCharm, the way the IDE was interacting with the index. And so, so that was fixed. And so now if your developers are using PyCharm or you're trying to get them to use PyPy capability, you can do so now with Nexus as of earlier this year. Dependency snippets, another area of the UI. This was a surprisingly popular thing that went away from Nexus 2, and our users asked us to put it back. So we put it back plus a bunch. This makes it easy when you're searching or browsing things inside of the UI to grab the snippet and put it into the appropriate manifest to leverage that capability. We've added popular version queries from Nexus Pro. This was one people were asking for. They want to be able to search and automate around particular assets. So that's out there. A Circle CI publisher. So you can find this in their marketplace as well to make it easy to publish from Circle CI. We've added dynamic storage capabilities inside of Nexus so that you can move things around. If you've outgrown your disk or your blob storage, you can seamlessly migrate these things. You don't have to take the system offline to move those things around. And importantly, it also allows you to move into our native S3 blob store if you happen to be running in the cloud. So that's a key one to leverage that dynamic storage. There have been some enhancements to cleanup policies for purging snapshots and old releases and things of that nature. By popular demand, routing rules are being added to Nexus 3 as well. This is coming out in a release very soon, and this is one of the big ones that a lot of our Nexus 2 users were waiting for before they upgrade to Nexus 3. Quickly, lots of new formats that we've added. People probably don't notice these, but you can go find them at the URL at the bottom. This is just a sampling of the ones that have come out recently. Now,
Brian, just a heads up, you've got about 2 minutes.
Yep, I'm good. So sneak peek looking forward, big focus on both of the products is to better enable cloud deployment. So people running their servers are increasingly moving them up into the cloud, Amazon, Azure, Google Cloud. And so, like I just mentioned, the S3 blob store capability and those kinds of things are key to the step. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes right now to better leverage the cloud native databases like Aurora and things like that. So you should see more announcements of that coming later in the year. Also, GitHub pull request integration. So we have a lot of things coming for GitHub users, both github.com and GitHub Enterprise. So stay tuned for that. That's pretty exciting, as well as a new Jira plugin to better enable Jira reporting and things like that. And then, of course, the malicious components and these types of things. This is the timeline. This is a sort of a view I've been presenting for a couple years now. You can read more and see the full details of this at the URL at the bottom. But we are spending a lot of time looking into this problem, and we have some things we're working on to help detect and prevent these types of things for our customers. And so that's a sneak peek. Hopefully we have more about that coming out in the next couple of months, so stay tuned. But Mark, that's the end.
Wonderful, wonderful, thank you. That was very comprehensive. That was great. So Brian's going to jump over to the Slack channel for a couple minutes if you have questions, and we'll see him over there. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.